Hi everyone, it's Jonathan here again with another firearm to show you. This one on the face of it is not too exciting, not too unusual. It's not a prototype, although I have got a cheeky one to show you as well. You might have recognised this as the Belgian AFN model 1949 self-loading rifle. Introduced in 1949, as the name would suggest. First produced in 1951, and in fact this one is marked (1951) at the bottom there on the breech. At the top we've got a crowned L for King Leopold III of Belgium, and ABL. Now before we continue, I think the ABL is quite interesting because that's a mark for the Belgian Army. Armée Belge, AB, but then you read from the B and it's Belgisch Léger, or something that might sound a little like that in Flemish Dutch, and it reflects the dual ethnicity, dual languages of Belgium. Now, I said this isn't unusual. In fact it is, because this one, on this side we've got a safety, lever safety, but on this side, and this is where people on Instagram and Facebook who've been guessing this one probably slipped up, because that right there is a selector lever, meaning that this is not an SAFN, this is an AFN. If I can get it to work from this angle, there we go. So in that forward position on SA, that's semi-automatique, and at the rear position where it was just now, it's on automatique. You'll also notice, incidentally, this little nubbin protruding there, that's the cocking indicator, which is quite an unusual feature in a rifle, and it's certainly unusual to have it in the trigger guard. And if we fire, dry fire, it disappears back into the gun, which I think is a noteworthy little feature. So this is the AFN. Now actually an awful lot of these were actually produced. It's not as rare as people think. And in common with a lot of armed forces in the mid-20th century, Belgium were thinking that they would have a two-tier system for their self-loading rifles. Some of them, I don't know how many per squad would have been the idea, would have been fully automatic or capable of automatic fire. So you can essentially provide your own fire support. Lots of countries thought they'd do that. Just about all of them who went with the full power rifle cartridge forms of the self-loading rifle, as it were. So the M14, the later Belgian FAL, which is the successor to this design, although it is not directly related to it. I'll come to that in a moment. And the G3, for example, they were all uncontrollable on automatic fire. So in one way or another, they were pretty much used on self-loading mode. So interesting and rare, at least in, I gather they're exceptionally rare in America, the automatic version. Now, some background on this. So this is a short stroke gas piston, tilting bolt operated, self-loading or select fire rifle. So a piston rod gets a whack from the gas tapped off the barrel and imparts a second whack, if you like, to the bolt carrier, which unlocks the tilting bolt and sends it to the rear. Just a very simple take on how that works. So a bit of background on this, because it has a very interesting British connection. So Dieudonné Sève, my best attempt, is a noted firearms designer today. Did his work with FN Herstal in Belgium, and he was already doing that prior to the outbreak of the Second World War, when the Nazis invaded, making it rather difficult to take anything forward. So he was already working on a gas-operated, tilting bolt operated, locked self-loading rifle design, and he had to hide the drawings, and he refused to cooperate with the Nazis initially, and then he was extracted by the British in 1941 and went over to work with the armament design department of the Ministry of Supply of the Ministry of Defence, which was a unit that had decamped to Cheshunt, the drill hall there, from the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield originally. Now, Enfield was still the manufacturing facility for all the prototypes, so it's still involved. Why am I going on about that? Well, Sive's work, his initial development work, took place in Britain because of the intervention of war. So, to get to this, and I'll come to the significance of that at the end, he first developed the self-loading experimental model rifle. There's a SLEM, as we tend to call it, SLEM 1 and a SLEM 2. And the 2 has an extended 10-round magazine sticking out of the bottom of the gun, but not intended to be removed in combat. But otherwise is pretty much a dead ringer for what would be adopted as the FN 49. At this point, automatic fire was definitely a no-no. Britain and just about everyone else was at that point still looking for a self-loading only rifle. So this doesn't have the selector, and the safety is also an earlier push-button design. The trigger guard is almost identical in form. Receiver is... Well, the whole gun differs in every detail. It's been completely re-engineered, but every feature remains the same, if that makes sense, except for the gas regulator, which, without getting too technical, allows you to turn the gas up and down to keep your gun running in adverse conditions. So you could very easily select one of several settings with just your fingers with this rotating unit, which basically changes the size of the gas hole. Now, that isn't on the 49, but it made a comeback for Sive's much more famous than the 49 design, the FN FAL. Now, the FAL saw tremendous success and is an iconic historic firearm today. It's still in use as a current firearm in certain quarters, although not in any frontline armed force. It's sort of a parallel universe version of the Model 49. So, with a final admiring look at this wonderful Enfield-made Sive rifle, we have to admit that the Brits perhaps dropped the ball in 1947. So in May 1947, there was a decision to select for further development the EM1 and the EM2 assault rifles. So Britain had developed its own assault rifle cartridge and its own assault rifle, very much in the German Sturmgewehr mould, but even more forward-thinking for the time in being a bullpup design. That went on to be developed, the EM2 did, alongside the prototype of the FAL. And long story short, there's a book on the subject, I gather, somewhere. Long story short, that failed, and Britain ended up adopting the Belgian Sive-designed FAL, which had been conceived as a Belgian take on the assault rifle. Lightweight, reduced caliber, reduced recoil cartridge, same cartridge as the M2, but due to the same politics that had intervened from the American side of things, it got redesigned back to a full power rifle cartridge, what became the 7.62 NATO cartridge. So it was adopted as a full power automatic rifle, not so far off from what the AFN that you just saw was. So, history lesson over. Well, ancient history lesson over. What happened in Belgium? Well, Sive returned to Belgium in late 44, as soon as he could. So development actually continued in parallel. The SLEM 2 and what would become the Model 49 carried on in parallel. The Brits dropped it, went for their own design. Belgium, on the other hand, allowed Sive to fully develop his design, eliminating the reliability issues that the Brits had encountered, refining it for mass production, but keeping basically all of the elements intact, and for a good proportion of the initial production run, selective fire capability. So it's this fascinating crossover point between traditional long wood and steel rifles with a full power cartridge, teetering on the brink of we're all going to end up with assault rifles later on. So I think it's a really interesting point in the development of modern firearms. And we're very lucky to have both of these and all of the others that tell this story and the story of Dieudonné Saive. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. We'll be back again next week with another of these. If you're into your gaming, do check out our collaboration with GameSpot, which goes into all sorts of wacky areas that we don't over here. If you'd like to donate to us, we have links in the description. And please do, if you can, come and visit us. We have 3 sites. We've got Leeds, which has been open for a couple of weeks now, thankfully. Fort Nelson for artillery. And we also have most of what's in the White Tower at the Tower of London as well. So, yeah, otherwise, I'll see you next week. Thanks.